We live, we're live, we're live, we're
Mhm.
live, we're live.
Mhm.
We got about 1 minute before we get started. We're gonna let the people join us.
I see it.
Mhm. I had it. I lost it. I had it. I lost it.
Good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock on the dot, and you are live with Dance Conversations with Gail. And our special guest tonight is Theara J. Ward. But before we get to her, let me tell you a couple of things. First of all, I like to start on time. So we are on time. If you come in later, welcome again. And this will also be replayed on Facebook at will. First of all, let me just say that I want to thank you for dancing. Look at me. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a wonderful journey for several years. And when I say this, I'm talking about Dancing Towards Diversity Initiative. And this part of it, this first movement is called LEAP, Living Legends Educating and Performing. And in LEAP, we have our forums, we have our discussions, and we are also will have professional artists to come in and work with students when we get back to that place. We'll have a dance free day. I'm just excited about everything that's going to happen with Project Leap because it is appropriate and it is for today. So, what is Project Leap? What is Dancing Towards Diversity Initiative? It's all about addressing implicit bias, racism in dance, and how that has affected us as a community of dancers of color, docs, how that has affected us in our journey. And people, this is not something new. This has been happening for years and years and years. I'll tell you my story one day, but tonight I won't share it yet. But I have a story too, and I'm sure that all of you out there have some story that you can tell when you encountered racism or bias at your dance studio or in the dance world, uh, just being dancers of color. So we want to hear those. We want to hear those stories and we want to share so you can know that you're not the only one out there. There is a way to overcome. But most important, how do we get to the other side of this? Because dance is just a microcosm of the world. We are in the world and we are dancers, and in our dance studios, in our dance companies, in the dance world, there is racism and we need to discuss it. Our voices need to be heard. Our opposition to implicit bias needs to be heard. And this is why this forum has started. So before we get started, let me do a little housekeeping. This is Dance Conversations. We desire to be honest, transparent, raw. We want to have conversations about the state of dance in the world. We will not tolerate bullying or any hate or negativity. We will have an opportunity for you to ask questions towards the end. So if you have a question you want to ask, write it in the comments and prayerfully we can get to it. But I'm so excited to hear Theara's journey in the dance world. So we may get to it. It just depends. We're trying to keep it within a time frame. The other thing is this will be a weekly forum. And if you'd like to be a part of it, just email us at dance, DANCE, DTI dancedtti@gmail.com. That's dancedtti@gmail.com. And if you stick around to the end, I will tell you the next guest that will be coming on in subsequent weeks. So I'm going to read our mission. The mission of Dancing Towards Diversity is to address diversity, equity, inclusion, and systemic racism in dance by bringing awareness through community discussions and forums, creating knowledge of dance as a viable art form to the underserved, underprivileged, and the community at large, by exposure to professional artists, performance, and training. And there are many aspects of this, and this is one of them. So now to our guest. Theara, say hey, Theara.
Good evening, everyone.
We are so happy to have you as our first inaugural guest of Dance Conversations with Gail. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Jessica, wave and say hey.
Hello.
And Crystal, wave and say hey.
Hello.
Jessica is working with me. She is with the K through 9. And Crystal is working on the collegiate level, getting those artists together so that we may continue this conversation and know what it's about. So if you are K through 9, you'll be reaching out to Jessica, still at the same email. And if you are on a collegiate level, you'll be reaching out to Crystal as well. We want to talk to men. I won't spoil the surprise, but we have some great men that'll be coming on and talking. And we want to talk to not only dance educators in the school system, but private owned dance studios too. What's going on in your dance studio? And do you even know? Or have you experienced or seen, or has it been brought to your attention? So
Right.
now to go back to Theara. Theara is with us today. I posted her bio on Facebook, but I just want to read a little bit because she's so awesome. Theara J. Ward began her professional career with the Dance Theater of Harlem at 13 years old. Her travels have spanned the globe to places like Hong Kong, Australia, South Africa, the former USSR, and South America. Her experience in the arts and entertainment has touched many areas. She made her Broadway debut, featured in the Tony Award-winning revue Black and Blue. The role of Ghost of Christmas Future and the Madison Square Garden version of A Christmas Carol was created on Theara. She performed in the epic mile-long opera on the High Line in New York City with music by David Lane. She has worked with artists that include Aretha Franklin, Liza Minnelli, the OJs, and Levert, Nizaki Shane, and Ronald K. Brown. She has appeared on commercials and television specials. There's so much more. I posted it on Facebook, but what I want to say is I met her at Dance Theater when we were 13 years old. And our parents, my mom and her mom, they would leave us, drop us off, and do their own thing. And we would dance all day long. Am I right? All day long. So that's how we met many, many years ago. And I've always kept her in my heart, and because she's an awesome, wonderful. If you've never seen her dance, just Google her, and something will come up that's more than awesome. So Theara, again, thank you for being our first guest, and I really appreciate you. And even our conversations before this, you all are in for a wonderful, powerful treat. So I want you, if you're ready to start, or if you want to say something, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm honored for this invitation and thank you. And it's always good to see you.
Yes, same here, same here. The first thing I want to ask, and the first thing I want you to do is tell us how you got started and what your journey was to being a professional dancer.
I started studying dance with a friend of my mother, Gwendolyn Biddle, in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was at the suggestion of my PE teacher. And I just wanted to dance all the time. I had the girls in my neighborhood dancing. I was the choreographer and they were the treasurer and the secretary, the president, the vice president, but I was the choreographer.
That's right.
And I think that was a really important part of my development because it helped me to understand who I am. And I love to create dances, and I wasn't hindered and told that I couldn't. And you know, there's a scripture that says your gift will make room for you. So my gift made room, basically. And I was really clear that I wanted to dance, I wanted to act. And at one point I wanted to be a journalist. So you know, I just kept those things in the back of my head. And Miss Biddle recommended that I go to New York during the summer and to do different conventions and that sort of thing. And somewhere in the midst of all of that, my mother, my sister, Miss Biddle, somewhere, one of those suggested that I go and see Dance Theater of Harlem. I believe I was 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old. And that was it. I knew that I wanted to go there because I saw people that looked like me. And at that point, they had afros and point shoes and flesh-toned Tyson. I was like, they got my attention with the afro.
Yay.
And so when I got there, I was just in awe of what I experienced. And I wasn't afraid of the rigorous schedule. I was 11 years old at my first summer session with DTH. And Mr. Mitchell and Carl Shook, Arthur Mitchell and Carl Shook saw me and thought that there was some potential there. And so they pushed me. And I came back the second summer and they're like, Mrs. Ward, can you bring her back? And she's like, no. And so by the third summer, my mother said, you know, 3 strikes and you're out. And she actually recalled a couple of months ago when she heard our voice, you know, our names over the loudspeaker. Would Mrs. Ward and Theara, would you come to Mr. Mitchell's office? It's like, what have I done? No. And it was to invite me to come back as an apprentice. And Dance Theater of Harlem paid for me to go to professional children's school for my academic training. And that was when we had school on correspondence. And it allowed me to travel with the company when I was ready. So I started traveling with the company when I was about 15. And did my first international tour with the company when I was 15, I believe. And you know, I was with the company for 11 years. And I didn't fit the prototype for a ballerina at all, aside from being Black. I grew really fast from the time that I was 13 and I'm almost 6 feet. I came when I was 5'5", and then all of a sudden I shot up to 5'10", 5'9", you know, in a very short amount of time. So with that realization, I knew that I had to be very good. And I had to be strong enough to carry my own weight. So I worked really hard. People could say what they want to about me, but one thing people could not say was that I didn't work. I worked really, really hard. I had my own little work routine, but my parents told me that I could do anything that I put my mind to. And so, you know, that's what I did. And after 11 years with Dance Theater of Harlem, one day Arthur Mitchell came in to the studio while we were recording Creole Giselle. He said, are you going to be a showgirl or a ballerina? And I said, oh, okay. All right. I'll just go on and be a showgirl. And I left the company a year after that, after we went to the Soviet Union, and I found myself in France. And fortunately, I heard that there was going to be a French cast of Cats while I was in Russia. So I just wanted to position myself in Paris so that I could audition. And I auditioned, and they said, vocally, you're not ready, but, you know, hopefully we'll give you a call in 6 months, you know, start working on your voice. And that's what I did. And in 6 months, they called me. And at that point, I was, had just finished working with the Jamison Project. And I went on to Paris for 9 months, did the musical Cats. And then the musical Cats in Paris was produced by the same company that produced Black and Blue on Broadway. And they said, if you can learn to tap in these 9 months, you can come and be in a Broadway show. I said, well, I'm gonna figure it out. And that's exactly what I did. I worked like a fiend in Paris. I also had a good time, but I worked like a fiend
I know you did.
because one of my dreams was to be on Broadway, and it happened. And while I was on Broadway, you know, I started auditioning for commercials, and I did print work. And eventually, when that show was over, I got other shows, regional shows, and I segued into straight theater, and I did a couple of straight theater gigs. I started really devoting myself to singing and studying voice. And when I auditioned 8 times for the musical Ragtime, and I eventually got it. But that show was going to be pivotal in my life. And yeah, that show was pivotal. And I did the Vancouver cast and the Chicago cast of Ragtime. And then I left the industry as I knew it in that capacity and went on a soul searching mission. And once I kind of figured out what was okay for me to do in this particular season, that's when the arts education part of my life started. And I started writing more, really dedicating myself to writing. And in the process of all of that, I created a one-woman show and, you know, did some television and just, you know, just started doing a lot more teaching. And so where I find myself now is history and archive. And it all worked, it all came together, it all works together somehow. Yeah. But using that creative expression with words and understanding context of history, helping people to understand things that happen in context in history. And that's where we are today.
Very good. I love the fact that you are a professional dancer and you segued into Broadway. And I know that you are also a liturgical dancer as well. So we are covering all of those genres. And
that was the soul searching part.
Yeah, that was the soul searching part. Can you now, looking back at your journey, so most of your professional life was the dance part was those 11 years at dance theater. Did you at any time go out to any other companies or you just were?
Well, I danced with Gallman's Newark Dance Theater. I've danced with Namyanka Christian Performing Arts Company. I did some soloist work. I was actually, very few people know this, but I was a guest artist with Ballet British Columbia with Eddie Shellman.
Wow.
In Vancouver, British Columbia. I think it was 1986, 87. That was something. So I did some guest work here and there. Who else did I work with? I worked a lot with Mickey Davidson and her Okra Dance Company. And just, soloist work here and there. I did a lot of different things, did a lot of different kinds of things. But there was I was in the commercial arena for 11 years as well. I think that might have been 12, like really focused on that. And so I got to work with some amazing people, doing commercials. I mean, when I got to work with Anne Reinking on a Victoria's Secret commercial, you couldn't tell me a thing. I was just beside myself. I didn't get to work with Bob Fosse, but I got to work with her. And I just learned, oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. And working with Susan Stroman on A Christmas Carol, we had a blast. Was it hard? Yeah. I had to learn how to fly.
Oh my.
But it was an amazing experience. Really. I've had an opportunity to work with some amazing people.
Amen. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. So let's get down to the crux of the matter here. We're on here to learn about you, but also to learn about your experiences with racism in dance. Tell me when you realized that there was racism in dance.
It took me a while, actually, because, my trajectory wasn't necessarily through white ballet schools. It was with my mother's friend, Gwendolyn Biddle. She's of African descent. Then I went to Dance Theater of Harlem, but in order to prepare to go to Dance Theater of Harlem for to be an apprentice, they sent me to Jones Hayward School of Ballet, which was one of the first Black dance, schools on the East Coast. And so my focus was be excellent, do the work, and everything's fine. I didn't know. My cousin Tracy and I have debates all the time because I kept saying to her, I really didn't understand that I was Black until I came to New York. Wow. I just knew that I was Theara.
Yeah.
Because I lived in a Black environment. I went to a predominantly Black church, a predominantly Black schools. And so nobody told me that I was anything less than. I was taught Black history in school. So I didn't know that Black history was an elective until I came to New York. And it was frequently an elective that was left out. Wow. So that was a shock to my system, just coming to New York at 13 years old and not having African-American history as a part of the history of this nation. Wow. That was a shock to me.
So you were in this room of Blackness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when did you realize, so you were 13, came to New York, it was a shock, but was there one particular instance that stands out for you?
The introduction to racism for me in New York was gradual. It was gradual. And the school that I went to, I love the school. I'm an alum. I love the school. But when you come from a predominantly Black environment and then you are perceived slightly different, you start going, and so there were things that were slightly different because I was culturally different. Mm-hmm. It's not just about color. No, I'm culturally different.
Yes.
And I think one of the first ones was when the other young people that were in the company went to professional children's school, and Mr. Mitchell would check our grades. And sometimes our grades in one class didn't measure up with the grades in our other classes. And he started noticing a pattern. And so he was asking us what the problem was.
No.
And some of us were a little more aggressive about finding out an answer. And so that was my first experience with knowing that race existed. And then there was another situation in school where one of the teachers who was new, not one of the teachers I had from 8th grade, challenged me on some things. And that was hard because none of the other kids that were working and going to school got challenged in the same way. And so I questioned, I started to question some things. And I'm just going to paint a picture because I had a really important conversation with a ballerina that I respect, and she made me aware of some things. So I'm going to utilize what I learned. And I want you to imagine this. I'm 15 years old, and there were other dancers that were at the school working with DTH at the same time. We're 15, 16, 17 years old. And we have a full work schedule. We weren't just in the school. We had to do the school classes as well at Dance Theater of Harlem, but we also had to do company class and rehearsal and maintain an A-B average for our academic studies. So playtime was not part of the equation. And so if you see brown people working in the field that you want to do, and you're not used to it, it can be a little bumpy. I put it like that. It can be a little bumpy. But I didn't care because I was like, I love all of y'all.
Right.
So I just kept it moving. But there were some that were challenged by that. The big one was when I had to do the SAT test on the road. And there was an article that came out in a magazine, and they asked me the same question: had I experienced racism? And I said, you won't know until you walk a day in my shoes. And so I had to do my SATs, which was a big thing for 11th graders. You know, everybody's focused on where you're going to do your SAT and studying and preparing. So it was really weird that I didn't take my SAT at school with my, fellow students. I took mine in Minnesota while I was doing performances on tour at a private school. I was in a minority. There weren't too many people of color. I probably could have counted them on one hand in the location where I took my SAT. And it was really interesting because I scored in the top percentile for my school, but I didn't know that. And when I came back, there were people that had read the article and said, you won't know until you walk a day in my shoes. People stopped speaking to me. That broke my heart. But there were a couple that were just diehards. They didn't care. But I got the cold shoulder amongst people that were my comrades. When I came, off tour or a heavy rehearsal schedule, I looked forward to coming to school so that I could be a kid. But it took a minute before people opened back up to me. But that
white or Black friends or mixed?
Well, the people at DTH were a lot of the brown people at our school. There were some others, but we had a constant flow of DTH kids that went to the school. So it was a challenge, it was a challenge. But a challenge that we rose to and overcame.
So after DTH, or even while you were touring with DTH, did you experience any racism on the road as a dancer?
I did.
Talk about that.
Ooh, I didn't know that just having this conversation would be like this. But our first tour to the UK, to London and Ireland, was exciting. We had standing ovations and encores. And I was with the younger dancers. There were 3 other younger dancers. We were all around the same age. And we were I think our rooms were near each other at the hotel in Dublin. And we went to McDonald's one day and we got harassed. And when my roommate and I got back to our room, there was excrement in our beds. To this day, I don't know if it was human or animal, but that really had an impact.
Wow.
And after that, there was a rule that for every 4 females, there had to be a male to walk us back to the hotel at night. During the day, it was okay. There was a similar thing when I did Black and Blue. Now, that was when I was 15. Let's go forward to Black and Blue in Berlin. West Berlin, right? Not around the time that the wall came down. And once again, we did encores and ovations and that sort of thing. And when we walked outside, they didn't know who we were. We were invisible.
Wow.
That impacted me as well. I mean, we had glamour, the most beautiful costumes in the world, and we were invisible. And that had an impact. And then, once I segued into theater and musical theater and that sort of thing, I started to see it more. There's a running joke that when we went to auditions and there were, women of color there, we would just laugh to see, well, there's only going to be 1 or 2 of us. And that's the way, our nation perceives things. It didn't take away from our artistry. It's just that was how they perceive things. And I had a really hard time with that because I had just come from an environment where it's like, do your best and you'll be, you'll get you'll reap from doing your best and working hard. I didn't understand that at all. And I just happened to come into the theatrical arena at the time of the Will Rogers Follies when they were trying out non-traditional casting. So I was among the talented and amazing women of color that were often called to be in the auditions so that they could work at diversity and equity. And that was quite interesting. And I, it was like through that, I had to understand who I was.
Right.
I really had to understand who I was. And I remember there was another show that I did. And there are two stories I'll tell. One was I knew the vocal part because it was a soprano and I was the first soprano. And I was like, well, I'm going to learn it. And they were like, but the Black girls sing the alto and second alto. And I was like,
Oh my.
Okay. But I learned it anyway. That's just me. And then there was Cats. Cats has all the different characters, all the different cats. So from my ballet training, my brain goes to Victoria. I'm not thinking color at all. I'm just thinking ballet. She's the ballet cat. So I learned it. Normally you don't do that, but I learned it. And for our cast, it was important for me to learn it because sometimes when people started getting sick or be injured, we would have to shift things around in the show. So people had to do parts of one character over here and part of another character over here. So there were times when I had to do part of the Victoria place, and then I would go back to being Cassandra. But that was interesting for me to process as well. It just, in my little head, it just didn't make sense. I didn't hold it against anybody. I just didn't, it didn't process, typing in that manner.
Yeah.
I just knew my background is ballet, and still sometimes, I will be asked to teach modern classes before ballet, but ballet is my first language.
Yeah.
As far as my technical ability to be able to back plan, forward plan, troubleshoot, that's the area that I feel most comfortable. But sometimes I'm not, that's not how people approach me because I'm Black. You must do modern. The other thing that I really feel strongly about addressing when it comes to race is hair. It's very important. And being in the commercial arena, that's where I really felt hair. And my hair being natural is very purposeful. It's not arbitrary. It took me years to have peace with my hair and my image and my type. And I'll never forget my first commercial, which did really well. It ran for 3 years in different markets. The discussion of hair was huge. And we finally found something that worked for me as well as working for, the producers. And that's when I started wrestling with hair. And Fuchsia Walker, dynamic actress, singer, entrepreneur, had her hair natural. And that was it. Her hair was out to here and it was stunning. And I'm like, okay, that's my hair goal. That is my hair goal.
Hair goals.
So I was doing commercials and the wigs, you had to wear certain wigs to have the right type. I mean, there was actually a gig that I got when I put on the wig. I didn't get the gig. I didn't get the call back when I had my hair. I had to go put on the fall wig.
Yeah.
So when I did Ragtime, I was excited because it gave my hair a chance to rest. And that's when I grew out the perm and I cut my hair down to about an inch, and went through the process of really discovering what my hair texture was and why God created me like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I haven't gone back. It's been 22 years.
Mm.
So hair and image has a lot to do with dance and types.
Yes.
You know, dance types and race. I really don't like the word race. I do not like the word race because it's a made up construct.
Oh, wow.
We are multicultural peoples. Race was made black and white. In order to get labor here to till the land and to get the ingenuity to make it happen 400 years ago. I don't like it because it hurts people. It prevents them from being their authentic, functional selves. What they were created to give to humanity. I just really am challenged by it. But I love people far more than the construct of race, the system of racism. And so I will, you know, no matter what stereotypes or typing may be in my path that I have to overcome, it's all about people being their best. Yeah. Doesn't matter what culture or color or complexion, people being their best.
Yeah. So I'm in the Deep South, and my story is a bit different from you. I didn't have the cocoon of you that you had when you were dancing with dance theater. And I said I would tell that later, not today. But what do you think we can do? Because I know you are experiencing the racism that's happening today differently because we are artists. We see it differently. What do you think we can do to be catalysts for change? How can we as dancers cut deep and cut away? It's just race. It's racism in dance. It's racism in the world. So what can we do to make our little community, I shouldn't say little, but our community know that it's wrong, that we can do better, that you are experiencing bias and you may not even know you're experiencing bias. You know, the pink tights, the permed hair, you can't do, you know, the ballet blancs that we can't dance because we are the fly in the milk. Speak a little bit about that.
When you have been a part of arts organizations that are, their primary mission is change, you learn strategies, you know, subliminally. You don't even know that you're learning strategies. I don't do things a lot of times with the premise of race or difference or bias. I try to do my best work and I try to listen. And I try to listen past my own biases of what the things that have happened to me that make me recoil. I try to listen past that so that I can listen, hear, see the humanity in someone else and help them recognize how it's not balanced. Sometimes it's asking questions. Sometimes it's just to present situations like, have you thought about? Did you know? Because sometimes people just don't know. Because as I was in my bubble of Blackness, there are people in their bubble of whiteness and they don't mean any harm. But who's going to go between the worlds?
That's true.
That's what the arts does. It bridges gaps. It brings things that are hard to discuss to the forefront.
If we allow it.
Right.
if we allow it to do that.
Listen, I'm sorry, I gotta go here. Jesus was a master storyteller.
Yes.
And the times that he made the most progress in just busting up stuff was when he told stories. He'd be like, well, there was once a man that had a field.
Yes.
By the time Jesus finished with that story, he was like, oh, well, what do I have to do? You know what so we have to master storytelling. We have to master people, interacting with people, the human condition, how to deal with people. That's what artists are. We are observers of life, and we have to just like take it and put it in and get it out. We've been gifted in ways to communicate that other people aren't. And so we have to have the boldness to be able to confront those things with our artistry. You can do a lot with a song and a hum. People know. You can do a lot with a dance. You can do a lot with a vignette. Storytelling, because it allows you to put all sides of the situation out there and then let the human that's witnessing come to their own conclusions. That's the power of the arts.
I agree with you. I always say a character doesn't have color unless you give it color. So there could be a, Asian, talk about the Nutcracker, Asian mother and Black father and white daughter. If we allow that to happen, if we don't just confine ourselves, if we allow ourselves to look like the community in which we live, because those are realities today. There's not just, we are the spectrum of colors. We're the spectrum of intercultural families. And if our dance studios and our dance companies would reflect what's happening in the community, then we would not be as racially segregated. They say that one of the most segregated days of the week is Sunday. Well, go to a dance studio and you'll see some racially segregation there as well. Because I had people to come into my dance studio, turn around, and because it was a Black studio. I'm like, a plie don't have no color. What the world? Tom don't have color.
Gail, it's just, we live in our silos sometimes. And unless you have opportunities to come outside of your silo, that's all that you know.
That's true.
And if the culture is built around the premise of your silo, then why do you have to come out of it? Why? So that's why I think it's so imperative to just deal with humanity when it comes to race. And when you present situations where people have to think outside of their silo, think outside of their box, flip it quickly. You have to think quickly on your feet, and if a situation comes up where someone does something like walks away from your business and you have an opportunity to talk to them, it's like, now, how would you feel if I came to your house and saw that there was nobody that looked like me and just walked away? How would you feel?
When you teach, how do you educate and change the thought process of those? Because I'm sure you teach all different, you don't like the word racist, but I'm going to use it, races, and all over the world. How do you address racism or separation and thought process? All of this is about changing mindsets. So what do you do? Or have you even had to address it that way?
Have I had to address it that way?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I think one of the most significant situations that I had to address were related to race was at the dance school, at Dance Theater of Harlem.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome how it evolved, because what happens at a summer intensive in particular is that you do have multicultural interaction. The bottom line is ballet in that environment and dance. So you prove yourself in the studio. People get to know you in the studio, what you produce in the studio. That's where you get your respect.
That's right.
So color starts to go out the window because of what happens in that studio. And my class is one of those classes where we got to talk about things that were tough. Once again, creating an environment to have tough conversations.
Tough conversations. Yeah.
And there was a presentation by an alum of DTH that was really powerful. And she brought up a screen that had something that was offensive to the majority of the kids in the room. And I could feel it and I saw their body language. And so when we got to my class, I unpacked it. And so a young man from Alabama got up and said, well, you know, the presentation was really nice, but that doesn't impact me. That's not relevant to me. The room went up in an uproar, different types of responses. Yeah. There was the uncontrollable laughter. There was the body language like this. There was the sucking the teeth. There was rolling eyes. It was a rumble, a visible, tangible, audible rumble in the room. And I said, okay, everybody, we're going to unpack this. And I went through every manifestation of discomfort in the room, including the young man that said, this isn't relevant to me. This doesn't impact me. And he was honest.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that situation didn't impact him because he was from a privileged family in the South. Oh. But he had never been the minority when something was offensive.
Wow.
Or said or done that was offensive. Yeah. So we unpacked every response. It was profound because it took 2 weeks to deal with.
Wow.
They not only talked about it in my class, they talked about it outside of the class with other adults. And some of the and the adults, we communicated together so that we were all on the same page saying the same thing. And the big thing was, yes, your situation is different, but you have to understand it impacts other people in a different way. The most beautiful thing happened. He stopped talking to me for a week. But when he had to help a Black Brazilian girl with her project, he learned about her because she was his. She could dance. And he respected that. But in listening to her story, his heart changed. And he said, Miss Ward, he came to the office. He said, Miss Ward, can I do my final report on translating her paper?
Oh, wow. Wow.
That was my most fulfilling, difficult, gut-wrenching, purposeful summers I had ever had. And then one of the students that I had been pouring into for a couple of years, because the situation was so challenging for me, I said, I need you to be the eyes to see what's going on and to assess, because I can't see right now. I've got to deal with each situation.
Right.
She nailed it.
Wow.
She nailed it with eloquence and grace in her writing. And so it takes understanding what race is, understanding cultural differences and biases, and having the courage to love and reach outside of your silo, to be agents of change, to change the system. Will it be difficult? Yes. And like my mother always told me that I took with me when I went to New York, she said, you can catch more bees with honey than with salt.
That's right.
That's the truth, sure enough.
We said vinegar. Catch more bees with honey than vinegar. It's wonderful to hear um, your experiences and to know that you did address it, that you gave them a voice. And I believe as dancers, we spend a lot of time in movement, but we don't, and that's our voice. That is our first language. But then we don't do this. It doesn't come out so that when we get into these situations, we don't know how to speak out, or we don't, because there could be backlash. I mean, yes, we're talking about it now, but are we talking about it at our dance studios, at our companies, or on Broadway? Are we talking about this is wrong? I didn't get the part because I'm Black, or I didn't, this happened because my skin is brown. Why and why is this happening? And we need to hold people accountable for their choices based on our skin color. I mean, again, in the Deep South, I've had several situations that, some of them destroyed my confidence in myself. And it was hard to recover from those things. But I love the fact that you're speaking up about it and you're teaching about it. I do it as well. When I teach, I don't hold back. And of course, I get to teach, even though my first language is classical ballet, I get called for African dance a lot, modern a lot. I don't have a problem with it. I'll teach it. But I have chosen to be intentional about pulling out and dissecting and even just making aware of African Americans, of people of color, dancers of color, and what we go through. And not just dancers, but when I teach about Harlem Renaissance,
Mm-hmm.
I teach from soup to nuts, and I take them all the way from slavery to now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have an idea of what. And some of the kids are even surprised when I tell them I teach classical ballet. They're like, and I know, I said, what is the issue? And I literally had a young boy to tell me he didn't know that Black people did classical ballet, much less taught it. I'm sure he didn't finish it, but he said didn't do it. And I was like, okay, he's been under a rock, but he was a little kid. So what do you expect? He hadn't been exposed to those things.
There you have to be gentle,
Yeah.
and treat and be gentle. And you have to develop a tough skin to be able to, you understand the injustice of the bias,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't react to the injustice of the bias.
Right.
This was a situation that happened just 3 years ago in Vermont. And we were in a small town. It was 4 on our team. There were 3 women of color and 1 woman of European descent. And I wanted to reheat my food because it was a very small town. So you couldn't go out after like 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And I wanted to reheat my food and I was looking for a microwave. And I asked at the front desk if there was a microwave and they told me that there wasn't one. When I mentioned this situation to my team the next day, my white colleague said, "Oh, but the guy at the desk said he heated up my food with no problem."
Oh, wow.
My heart broke. And when we were in the grocery store, people were staring at us. And that was, kind of like, I had forgotten what that felt like.
Yeah.
And we were doing a workshop about the history of Africans in America, diaspora. And it was really interesting because I'm a loner.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I like to walk after I work to just get my breath. My colleagues were like, nope, whatever we do, the 3 of us have to stick together. And that was real. That was real.
Yeah, it's we have to keep talking. We have to keep sharing. We have to keep allowing ourselves to push past whatever hurt and pain that we have experienced and be very vocal. Um, we as dancers, we express ourselves through our bodies, and that because that's what we do. But now is a time for us to speak up. If there are any questions in the comments, we've got a couple of minutes left. Um, I see you, Q. I see you. I want to say hey to everybody. Didn't get a chance to do that in the questions, but does anybody have any questions? If you type them in real quick, we'll ask Theara. We've got a couple of minutes left before we have to let her go. I think this is an awesome platform for us to really have the conversations, the tough stuff. There won't be just dancers of African descent on this. There'll be other hopefully Latin, Latinx, and Caucasian. We want everybody to chime in and give their perspective. I want somebody to say to me, hey, I knew you were Black, but I didn't know there was things going on that kept you from dancing. I just thought you didn't want the part or something to that effect. I know that sounds crazy, but we need to have the conversations that address the issues, and not just, we're not bashing, we are just shining a light on what's going on, because I want my grands, I want the babies that are coming up now, Crystal and Jessica's kids and all of the children out here, not to have to face the same things that we had to face growing up. Let me see. What is her advice to young dancers to erase the biases as they see them? That's a question. What is your advice to young dancers to erase the biases as they see them?
Well, one of the most important things that I've always done is do research about the people that I'm working with, the organizations that I'm working with. And I do more than just, I want to understand their culture and their expectations. And so if I have to change my hair to fit that culture, so be it. If I have to change my clothes or, the kinds of clothes that I wear, so be it. But do your research and be prepared and be willing to work hard and slow to speak and very observant. You cannot react to everything.
It's true.
You have to assess the entire situation before you give a response. It's worth the wait.
It is. I know that I wanted to dance above everything else. So the racism that I experienced, it affected me, yes. But the bottom line was, this school had what I wanted. This teacher had what I needed. So I was going to study, and I was going to keep coming to class every day, and I was going to work hard to get as far as I could get here in the South. So that's what we did. We worked hard. We pushed past. I had many friends to come and go, and they were like, I don't know how you stay there. And I said, because it's about the dance. It's not about them. But that's another story. Theara, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today. I know we have to let you go, and we want to keep this to an hour. I do want to remind everybody, go on to my Facebook page, Gail A. Glover, and read Theara's bio, hit her up. She's an awesome, fantastic, wonderful teacher, dancer. Just have a conversation with her. She'll talk you and she'll tell you. She keeps it straight. She cuts to the chase, shoot, you'll get it. Definitely hit her up. How can they get in contact with you, Theara?
They can hit me on Instagram at Theara.J, and Facebook at Theara J Ward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hit her up, call her, come and teach whenever we can start doing that again. Who knows? But if not, we can do it online. That's what we're moving to, right? We're moving to that. We're doing that. And next Thursday, let me see. Here's my closing. Just a reminder, if you want to be a part of the dance conversation, then email us at dance tdi@gmail.com. DANCETDI@gmail.com. That's dance tdi@gmail.com. And we will contact you. Next Thursday, we will have Whitney Hewell with us. She dances now with the Kansas Ballet. We're excited to have her as well. She is a homegirl from Columbia, South Carolina. So we want to hear from her as well. And she was actually the first African American in Kansas City Ballet's history to perform the role of the Sugar Plum Fairy. So we're excited to have her. Please like our Facebook page, and we're also on Twitter. You want to go under Columbia Community Arts Collective, and you'll see Dancing Towards Diversity Initiative. Like us, and remember, keep the passion, and now take action for such a time as this. Thank you again,
Yes.
Theara. I love you so much.
Love you.
See you guys later. See you guys next Thursday.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Gail.
Thank you, sweetie. I'm cutting it off.
Okay.